I receive tons of PC part picker lists from you guys on the reg, asking me for my feedback. What do I think of this CPU paired with this GPU? Do I have enough RAM? And more often than not, I do not reply to those because I simply don't have the time. I'm too wrapped up busy doing other things, and they just come in at such a ridiculous rate. It seems like I'm playing whack-a-mole. So I thought today would be a cool opportunity to break that cycle and actually look at some of your parts lists and give you some pointers. Unfortunately, we can't go over all 500 something lists that I receive on a monthly basis, but we will be discussing 4 of them in closer detail today. I know 4 doesn't seem like a lot. However, I made sure each of these parts lists target different price points, so it's a bit more relevant depending on what kind of budget you're looking at for your own personal build. So let's dive right in, shall we? Starting with Genju. Genju, some of these were submitted through Twitter, so not everyone's using their real name, of course. So Genju, I think, was planning to build this system for a friend, if I remember correctly. His budget is $600, at least that's what the total cost of this build comes out to be, so I'm gonna assume that's about the ballpark he wants to spend. And the first item he's got on the list here is an AMD Ryzen 5 3400G quad-core CPU. Technically an APU, it does have Radeon graphics built in, and this is a fine CPU. There's nothing wrong with it. However, for 147 bucks, I mean, you can get a Ryzen 5 2600 6-core processor for $120 right now. I think that's a better deal overall if you're gonna be pairing a discrete GPU with the CPU, mainly because you're getting 2 more cores and 4 more threads. So if you happen to be streaming or video editing, any kind of multi-threaded workload is gonna benefit tremendously from that uptick there. And even though we're going from a 3000 series to a 2000 series CPU, the architecture is the same because on these Ryzen APUs, they are typically using the last generation architecture. So both of these are still 12 nanometer, so we're not downgrading on the manufacturing process. I think the motherboard he picked is right on the money, the ASRock B450M Pro 4. It's a micro ATX board. There's nothing spectacular about it. I mean, it's 75 bucks. It's pretty much as cheap as they come when it comes to B450 boards. It's very basic, it doesn't have many bells and whistles, but it gets the job done and it fits the budget. So I'm gonna keep it. For memory, he's got 16 gigs, a 2x8 gig kit of Corsair Vengeance LPX, DDR4 at 3200 speed. 3200 speed is a little bit low for Ryzen because of how much it favors and how much impact memory frequency has on frame rate. So I'd like to bump that up to 3600, and what do you know, there's a Corsair Vengeance LPX 16 gig kit that's 3600 speed and a few bucks cheaper, so clearly the better deal there. The only drive that Genju has in this parts list is a Seagate Barracuda 2TB drive, which is a fine drive, and I'll actually be using this drive in almost all the parts lists today because it's just such a good value. I don't know why this one says it's $81, but the other ones that I've found are like 50 bucks, so it's like unbeatable. However, this being the only drive in the system is a little bit concerning because it's gonna be slow. So I've managed to actually squeeze in not just the 2TB Barracuda for 50 bucks, but a 240 gig SanDisk SSD Plus as well, just to make the system feel way snappier overall. The original list also calls for an XFX Radeon RX 570 4 gig card, but optimizing things as I was able to get a Zotac GTX 1660 Super 6 gigabyte card in here, which is quite a bit faster. I would say like maybe 50 to 60% faster on average than an RX 570. It's in a completely different class, so I think this is a better fit overall. I mean, you can even tell from the pricing, 114 bucks to 220, and the performance reflects that difference as well. So much faster card there, and you get a bit more VRAM out of the box. The case I've kept the same, the Thermaltake Versa H15. Not a whole lot of options here at the lower end when you're talking about a $40 case, and with this budget, we didn't have a whole lot more headroom for a nicer case. There are those DIY PC cases that are like, you can get them for maybe 10 bucks less, maybe a $30 case or something like that, but the interiors are so just kind of garbage actually, compared to the Versa H15. I mean, the H15, the inside of it isn't glamorous or anything, but it's got some room to grow. There's a bit more room behind the motherboard tray for cable wiring. It doesn't have like that stupid bar for mounting drives at the front that's just kind of in the way of the GPU. And it has a full front mesh panel, which is great for airflow. So I'm sticking with that chassis. The power supply here is the EVGA BR 500 watt. This is an 80 plus bronze unit for $45. Not a bad option. I've opted for a 600 watt 80 plus Thermaltake Smart unit instead though. You know, why not get the extra 100 watts? It does look like it's standard 80 plus as opposed to bronze. However, I think that 100 watt difference is gonna more than make up for that. So overall, our parts list, my parts list came out to $656 as opposed to $594. So roughly a $50 to $60 increase in price. But overall, when you kind of look at the core specs here, going from a quad core to a hexa-core. Does anyone say hexacore? No, it sounds weird. 6-core, going to a 6-core processor, along with a much faster GPU. I think overall that extra 50, 60 bucks is well worth it. Scaling up to a $900 build, let's talk about Gamer Grill. This is from Gamer Grill. I don't know if this is a boy or a grill, but this is their system that they put together for $872.40 to be exact. And they've got an Intel-based platform here. This is a Core i5-9600K 6-core processor, which is not a bad CPU by any stretch. It is $230, however, and just given the nature of the Intel platform versus the AMD platform, there's a lot of differences that I've talked about extensively, which I'm not going to go into full detail, but to quickly rattle off some of the main benefits of AMD's AM4 platform over Intel's, you've got scalability, you know, backwards compatibility, forwards compatibility on AM4, at least for now. Decent stock coolers that come included with a lot of the Ryzen CPUs, that is just extra money in your pocket or that you can spend elsewhere in the build, and the freedom to overclock any Ryzen CPU on a multitude of platforms. Those are just some of the reasons why it's really hard to justify Intel right now. So going back to this parts list, 9600K, 6-core processor for $230. I'm gonna opt for the Ryzen 5 3600 because it's also 6 cores. It does support SMT, however, so you get 12 threads as well, as opposed to just 6 cores and 6 threads on the 9600K. The price difference is huge too, $230 going down to $175. That's a killer deal for the 3600. You can usually find it for around $190, $200, which is still a good deal, but at $175, it's pretty unbeatable in this class. So we're going with that. It also comes included with a stock cooler, so Gamer Grill doesn't have to worry about picking up a Hyper 212 for $30 extra. For motherboard, we have a MSI Z390A Pro, perfectly fine motherboard. However, it's Intel. We need an AMD board, so I went with an MSI. Their B450A Pro Max is an ATX motherboard for $100. I really like the fact that it's ATX and not micro ATX like some of the cheaper boards out there. It just gives you some more flexibility for expansion if you wanted to throw in some PCIe cards down the line, like a capture card, for example. And it gives you more options when choosing a case as well. And I think $100 is a pretty fair price for a board given a $900 budget overall. The memory kit that Gamer Grill picked out is a G.Skill Trident Z RGB 16 gig kit of DDR4 memory at 3200 speed, which again is too slow. I think it's too slow, especially when you're scaling up the budget now and you can afford faster memory a bit more easily. But great choice overall on the kit itself. G.Skill Trident Z memory is some of the finest RAM out there, but it's just a little too slow. Unfortunately, scaling up to 3600 speed on this particular kit does increase the price significantly, but there's certainly kits out there like the Corsair Vengeance LPX that's offered in a 3600 speed kit for not too much money. So 75 bucks here versus $100 on the G.Skill Trident Z, and you're gonna be getting faster FPS at the end of the day because of it. Now the original storage setup here isn't too shabby. We've got a Samsung 970 EVO Plus, 250 gig M.2 NVMe drive, and a 1 terabyte Seagate Barracuda mechanical. However, I'd like to scale that up just a tad because I think 1.25 terabytes is just a little too slim for a modern day gaming system these days, unless it's like a super duper budget build where you're gonna be playing mostly indie games or really small size games. But with titles getting up to 150, sometimes even 200 gigs in size, that 1 terabyte of storage is gonna seem really small really quickly. So instead, I'm scaling up our capacity with a 2 terabyte Seagate Barracuda. However, we're gonna be a little bit slower on our C drive with the crucial BX500 240 gig SSD. It's a 2.5-inch drive, SATA Rev 3, 6 gigabit per second, so it's not NVMe. It is gonna be slower than the drive that Gamer Grill picked out, but at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself if you're actually gonna be utilizing that additional speed of an NVMe drive, and if the extra cost of that drive is really worth it, because this BX500, it's quite a bit slower. It's a lot slower, but it's also half the price. And when you're talking about a $900 build, you really want to prioritize the speed of your CPU and GPU before your storage, especially if you already have some form of SSD in your system that's usually fast enough, plenty fast enough for the vast majority of gamers. Our starting GPU that Gamer gamer girl picked out is the EVGA GTX 1650 Super 4GB SC Ultra Gaming card, which is 160 bucks, and it's a little slow. I'm gonna say it's a little bit slow for this price point. So I've upgraded us to an XFX RX 5700 XT, 8GB. We're literally doubling our VRAM, and we have a significantly faster GPU. If you just look at the price difference, $160 versus $380. This is exactly why I went a bit more modest with our SSD, so that we would have room for a faster graphics card and ultimately have a much smoother and more seamless gaming experience. Like the last parts list, the GPU that I've chosen is in a completely different class than the original card that was selected, and overall it's just gonna boost the capabilities of the system tenfold. For case, there's actually no case in this parts list. I don't know if they forgot or if they already have a case, so they didn't add it, but that's obviously not factored into the price here either. So I think for a build like this, the Fantex Eclipse P300A mesh is a perfect option. It's $60, and it doesn't really get much better at that price for a chassis. I mean, you've got tempered glass side panel, power supply shroud, excellent cable management, and really good airflow. Now with the P300A mesh, you have a completely mesh front panel, which is gonna promote healthy intake and airflow, thus lowering our temperatures and potentially even increasing our performance a bit. Finally, our power supply change is going from a Corsair RMX 650 watt 80 plus gold unit to a Thermaltake Tough Power Gold 750 watt unit. So since we're scaling up our GPU to an RX 5700 XT, these Radeon cards aren't quite as power efficient as some of their NVIDIA counterparts. NVIDIA's got some really good performance per watt, whereas the RX 5700 XT is a bit of a power hog in comparison, so we are gonna have to scale up. I think the minimum PSU requirement is 650 watts. I think recommended though is 700, so we're gonna just give ourselves a little bit of a ceiling room there with a 750 watt unit. This is also 80 plus gold, so that extra efficiency is gonna help out a lot. That brings the total cost of this revised parts list to $964. So again, we're about maybe $90 over the original list. $90 though, that extra $90 gets you a scalable platform on AM4, faster memory, which means higher FPS, a significantly faster GPU, and 1 additional terabyte of storage, and a computer case. That's important. Our next list is from Mauricio, who's configured roughly a $13 to $1,400 PC. I think it was closer to $1,250 when I first looked at it a couple days ago because there were certain deals that were active that are now gone. So I'm gonna try to get us actually a little bit under $1,300, maybe closer to $1,200, $1,250. But it'll be interesting to see what Mauricio's come up with here, because at $1,200, once you get past that $1,000 price point, you could really start customizing the look of your system a bit more. More doors open when it comes to cosmetics, RGB and things like that, where you could really get carried away and spend, $300 on fans, which we'll talk about later. But it's important going into this to realize that you should be comfortable and happy with your performance before you start splurging on purely aesthetic hardware. But let's see how Mauricio did, starting with a CPU, Ryzen 5 3600 6-core processor. Now this is a really solid processor. It ships faster out of the box than the 3600 Non-X, but my one gripe with it, and the gripe that many people have, is that the 3600 Non-X is simply, most of the time, a better value. Especially when you can find it for as low as $175 right now on Amazon. That extra 0.2 gigahertz that you get with the 3600X just isn't enough to justify that $20 difference. Most people who are looking for 3600X speeds will just buy a 3600 and overclock it. It's really not too difficult to do, and the chip's certainly capable of that. So at the end of the day, they're both solid options, but when it comes down to it, the 3600 just has that stronger bang for the buck. Mauricio's also added a Thermaltake UX100 low profile kind of RGB cooler here. This ties in with what I said earlier just a moment ago about, wanting to bling out your system once you've got a bit more cash flow at your disposal. But I would say resist on this one. Even though it's only $19, that's still 19 bucks that you could put elsewhere. Plus, the Ryzen 5 3600 already includes a stock cooler. Yeah, it doesn't have, fancy RGB bling on it, but again, this is something that you could easily upgrade down the line, and maybe this would be a little bit different if this wasn't just a really basic low profile cooler. If it was like a tower cooler that, maybe was more future-proof, I hate using that word, but if it was more future-proof for like a faster CPU that you wanted to drop in down the line, like a 3700X for example, then there'd be a bit more rationale behind it. But this Thermaltake cooler doesn't offer any more performance than the stock cooler otherwise would. I can't imagine there'd be much of a difference at all. At the end of the day, I would skip it. Just use the stock cooler for now. Our original motherboard here is the MSI MPG X570 Gaming Edge Wi-Fi ATX motherboard at nearly $200. So again, we don't need X570 here. A solid B450 board like the MSI Tomahawk is perfectly adequate. It's a lot cheaper, 112 bucks, and the Tomahawk is a fantastic board. It's critically acclaimed, just a super great solid board all around. Very nice power delivery given the price, and a very nice aesthetic as well, which is just an added bonus. For memory, we have a Corsair Vengeance RGB Pro 32 gig kit. Wow, of DDR4 3600 speed memory. So he got the frequency right. 3600 is dead on, but 32 gigs, Mauricio, are you video editing? Are you doing some heavy streaming? Because if you're just gaming and using this for, web browsing and, maybe some word processing, you really don't need 32 gigs. 16 gigs is kind of that sweet spot, happy medium that you can get for a lot cheaper than $200. I've actually added the exact same kit, but just half the capacity for 105 bucks. So that'll allow you to allocate that budget elsewhere where it really matters for gaming. Mauricio has added one drive to the system, and that drive is a Silicon Power A80 1TB NVMe M.2 drive for $131. Not a bad option, but like I said earlier, 1 terabyte is you're gonna burn through that really quick. So I've opted instead for a 2 terabyte Seagate Barracuda to handle the sort of mass storage for those heavy titles, along with a 500 gig Western Digital Blue SN550. Also an NVMe drive, so very fast, super snappy drive to boot off of. Install some lighter applications on there like your web browser, but it's 65 bucks. It's a pretty darn good deal actually. The SN750 from WD is also a solid choice. It's quite a bit faster though, probably faster than Mauricio's needs, than most people's needs, but this drive configuration will make your system feel really fast and responsive while also giving you sufficient storage. The graphics card here is the PowerColor Radeon RX 5600 XT 6GB card. I think that's a little bit low, for a $1,300, $1,200 build, you can do better than that, Mauricio. Not that this is a bad card, this is a really good, amazing value GPU. I gave it really high marks in my review, but with the budget you have to work with, which is very generous amount, you can scale this up quite a bit. So I've actually recommended a Gigabyte RTX 2070 Super, 8GB card, so it gives you 2 more gigs of memory there, along with a much faster GPU. The RTX 2070 Super is pretty much on par with an RTX 2080, and it supports the whole suite of RTX and ray tracing technologies from NVIDIA. Not to mention the Windforce cooler on these Gigabyte cards is always very effective and quiet. Now I have a bone to pick with your case, Mauricio. The NZXT H510 Elite is a good mid-tower case. It is a good case, sure. But for $150, I personally think it was one of the more overpriced cases of 2019. It doesn't really bring a whole lot of extra features over the standard H510, but it's like double the cost if I remember correctly, which I just can't justify. Unless you're made of money or you gotta have this case for whatever emotional reason, cosmetics or something, I would veer away from it. I'm opting instead, this is just one option of many good options out there, the Lian Li LanCool 2. It's a $90 case, it's pretty new on the market, and it's been getting a lot of good feedback from different tech journalists and stuff and other reviewers. I haven't had a chance to check it out personally. I did see it at Computex. I think it was like a prototype that I saw at last year's Computex, and I did like what I saw. It's got plenty of modern features, plenty of water cooling support, and you do get some RGB bling at the front even. Mauricio's power supply of choice was a Thermaltake Smart Pro RGB 650 watt 80 plus bronze fully modular unit for $138. That was a little steep, I thought, for a 650 watt unit. Obviously, you never want to skimp on your PSU. However, you can still find pretty good deals on reliable units like this EVGA Supernova that I picked out. It's 550 watts, so it does lose 100 watts of power. However, the efficiency has been bumped up from bronze to gold, so I think that kind of compensates for it. And finally, we have further confirmation that Mauricio really wants RGB in his system, as he's added 2 NZXT Air RGB2 fans for 30 bucks a pop. That's $60 worth of RGB fans. Which is fine. I've actually added them in my parts list too, because if he's got the extra spend and that's important to him, then I think with my revised parts list, the performance is where it kind of should be for this price point, this budget of build. So I think, he can have a little fun. Bling it up, Mauricio. Finally, we have our BITBOI system. This is from Afro Devil with a $2,100 PC. This is his weight loss goal PC. Apparently Afro Devil is in the middle of a weight loss challenge where he's already lost 15 pounds of his 45-pound goal. So huge huge congrats on that, man. Keep going. I really hope you get there. And this is a really nice reward that's waiting for you right at the end of that finish line. So even more motivation there. So let's take a look at what Afro Devil has in store with our $2,100 build, starting with an AMD Ryzen 7 3700X 8-core processor. Yes, I'm gonna say yes to this one. I think this is the first CPU that I am not changing out of these 4 parts list, because I think this is well suited for the job, unless Afro Devil has some specific needs where rendering is really important. He really needs to utilize tons of cores. I think the 3700X is well suited for this price point. For cooling, we have a Corsair H100i RGB Platinum SE 240mm liquid cooler. This is a really nice cooler. I've used this plenty of times, even recently, but man, is it pricey, $160. So my suggestion here was, if you can scale back on the cosmetics and really put, again, performance first and foremost, I think this is a perfectly adequate 240mm AIO, the Corsair H100X. It's actually intended to be more on the budget side of things, but you're still getting a 240mm rad and the promise of a quality Corsair product. This is only $90, however, and you can always add a set of RGB fans to the radiator down the line. For the motherboard, Afro Devil has picked out the Asus ROG Strix X570E Gaming ATX motherboard for $300. No, stop it. Just get a B450 board, get a nice B450 board, because now you have more cores and threads, so you're gonna need more stable, clean power, which is why I would suggest something like an Asus ROG Strix B450F Gaming. This can definitely handle that chip. It could even probably handle a 3900X. I wouldn't flinch dropping one of those in there. This is a very well-reviewed board, and it's saving you roughly $175, so why not? For memory, we have Corsair Vengeance RGB Pro 16 gigs, DDR4 3200 speed. Again, with the lower frequency, I'm gonna scale that up to 3600, but at 3600 speed, the Corsair Vengeance RGB Pro kits get a little pricey, I think, if I remember correctly. So I'm gonna go with the G.Skill Trident Z RGB kit instead. As far as storage goes, we've got an Intel 660p series, 1TB M.2 NVMe drive, and a 2TB Seagate Barracuda, both of which I have ported over to my list. I think these are solid choices. I think it gives you a really solid C drive to even install some games on there with really fast speeds that will increase your load time significantly. But also you have that backup mechanical drive for additional storage, movies, music, photos, and things like that. And this is all coming in at a really good deal too. I mean, you've got 3 terabytes of storage, a third of that being NVMe solid state, and it's only roughly $160 combined. So that's actually not too bad at all. Now I'm starting to see a trend with the GPUs on these parts list. Most everyone has added a GPU that I think is slower than what could be had for the budget at hand. So Afro Devil has chosen an RTX 2070 Super from Gigabyte. It's actually the same exact card that we used in the last parts list. However, I think we can squeeze, actually I know we can squeeze an RTX 2080 Ti in there. This one in particular is from Asus. This is their ROG Strix Gaming. This is the non-OC version, but still a beast of a card. Yes, this is a $1100 GPU. It is ridiculously expensive, but we're still able to squeeze it into this budget because of the other corners that we've cut, and those corners have not been detrimental to the overall performance of the system. I don't really need to try to sell you guys on this card or tell you why it's awesome. You already know, it's a $1,000 GPU because it's fast as hell. Excellent choice of case here, Lian Li PC011 Dynamic. At 157 bucks, it is well worth every penny. Unlike the NZXT H510 Elite that we talked about earlier, the PC011 deserves all the praise that it's received. The quality's top notch, plenty of water cooling, like ridiculous water cooling support, and just so much flexibility. Very well thought out, smartly engineered case. Hats off to DeBauer. So yeah, I'm not gonna change that at all. And then we have the power supply, which is originally a 750 watt, 80 plus gold certified Corsair RM. I absolutely love this power supply. However, I have switched it over to something just a little bit cheaper, shaving 20 bucks off of the price here, roughly 20 bucks, with a Cooler Master MWE Gold, 750 watt, 80 plus gold, also fully modular and extremely reliable. It's just one of those little changes that'll allow us to throw more budget at those hard-hitting components that make the biggest impact, like our CPU and graphics card. It also looks like Afro Devil added a monitor here, but there's no pricing, so fortunately we don't have to account for that in the total cost. But there are $300 worth of RGB fans in this list, so that's interesting. And you know, there's nothing wrong with RGB or cosmetics in general. Like, I love that crap. But when it encroaches that strongly on your budget and it forces you to buy an RTX 2070 Super when you could afford an RTX 2080 Ti, that's when splurging on aesthetics isn't the most ideal choice, in my opinion. So at the end of the day, my parts list was 2,148 versus the original 2,092. So yeah, 50, 60 bucks more. 2080 Ti though. 2080 Ti, come on. Come on, the Holy Grail can be yours if you let me edit your parts list. Well, that's pretty much gonna wrap it up for me. Thank you guys so much for watching this. Let me know what you thought of this video, if you'd like me to do more parts list revisions down the line. And again, this is not like an end-all answer, like these are the parts you need to get. They could have gone many different ways. If you enjoyed it, let me know down below, toss a like, and get subscribed for more tech content on the way. Check out bitwit.tech, our merchandise store, lots of stuff there. Plenty of shirts like the one I'm wearing right here. Stay positive, get it? Because positive air pressure, stay positive. It's like, you get it. Apart from that, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a good one, and I'll see y'all in the next video.